Welcome to the Kickstart podcast, where we highlight the stories of how professionals kickstarted and navigate their successful careers. My name is Preston, and on this episode, we have the pleasure of hosting someone who started her career in talent management before working in staffing and recruiting, first on the agency side, before switching to the internal corporate side at really great companies like Cloud Kitchen and Plaid. Sam, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Preston. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely, my pleasure as well. So I think a great way to get started is would you mind just sharing, for those that are unfamiliar with who you are, a little bit more about your background?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I had an entire career in talent management as an entertainment talent agent, specifically focused on reality television personalities and producers, which sounds super glamorous. And it was effectively recruiting adjacent, right? Pitching candidates and personalities for jobs on camera, and then negotiating their employment contracts. And for producers, taking ideas that they had for television shows and trying to sell those to various networks and streaming providers as well. So it was really furthering the careers of people just in a very different field, mostly creative and media and entertainment. After doing that for a decade, I segued kind of briefly into the influencer marketing space when that was first becoming a thing, working with various publishers and startups for how to engage with YouTube personalities, Instagrammers, people that were on Vine at the time. I hope that doesn't age me too much. And people who were still blogging, etc. While doing some of that, a lot of the companies I was working with kept on asking me, well, who do you know who could also do this for us or could potentially do that as well? So I segued into recruiting, not deliberately, but frankly through helping some of the companies that I was already engaged with on the talent side of the house. And then one of my dear friends landed at a Series B company as their head of product and was having a really hard time finding a head of product design. And she said to me, "Hey, Sam, you seem to know a lot of people. Can you help me figure this out?" And I said, "Sure. What's product design?" So I got quickly up to speed on startups, technology, product design, etc. And without any fancy tools, I helped her find that person in competition with, what I came to find out were some pretty big tech recruiting agencies at the time, and helped make that placement for her and help both sides negotiate. So caught the bug from there, started recruiting for some, other startups, some more established companies, took a hard right into buy-side financial services recruiting to get some agency experience and some formal training. Then was lucky enough to get a call from the team at Cloud Kitchens, where I really cut my teeth in that early stage 0 to 1 hyper growth global recruiting stage. And then after doing that, wanted to see what hypergrowth looked like at a later stage, jumped on board with the team at Plaid, where I was helping to scale business recruiting operations. And now I'm consulting for some early stage companies as they continue to grow and scale.
That is quite the career. Thank you so much for that wonderful overview, Sam.
Of course.
Now, before I get into recruiting, for someone who's just unfamiliar with talent management, and from your description, it really did make it sound truly exciting and glamorous. But it also, interesting enough, sounds like there's a lot of parallels between what you did in terms of scope of work and obviously as a recruiting professional, which is really interesting. Now, for those who are curious in the audience, like, how did you get into talent management? Is that something that you've always wanted to do? And what was kind of like your weekly and daily schedule or structure? Like, if people are kind of curious about what is a day in the life like a talent agent?
So I'll address that first. A day in the life is completely unpredictable. You have no idea what's going to come at you from one day to the next, especially in this day and age with the presence of social media and personalities. When you're in the business of furthering those personalities' careers, you have to be prepared for anything. I know I was catching up with a colleague recently, and they had a candidate make a Twitter snafu, and they were, all up in arms about how they were going to handle that or tackle it. So how did I get into the talent management space? When I was in college, I interned in entertainment, most specifically in the music industry. It was interesting at the time, again, dating myself a little bit. It was right when the iPods came out. And so the beginning of like music digitization. So I was working in the music industry, and there were all these people kind of saying, well, people love to buy albums. And then there were all the young people walking around with their iPods saying, no, we don't. We just want to walk around with this handheld device. And the music industry, of course, over the last 15 years has changed dramatically because of that, right? And so when I was graduating from college, all I wanted to do was be in entertainment. I'd watched Entourage, which again, probably dates me a little bit, but I was like, I think I could do that. I could thrive in an environment like that. And so I applied to roles at every conceivable entertainment agency out there, and was lucky to be given the opportunity at a small boutique agency, which focused on journalists and, again, reality television, documentaries, etc. So that like unscripted programming niche. That company was eventually acquired by a large Hollywood talent agency, so had a lot of exposure to a lot of different folks, a lot of different resources, post acquisition, which was really exciting. And so when it comes to that being glamorous and folks wanting to get their foot in the door, really what the entertainment industry has always been about is being scrappy and figuring it out on your own, kind of carving your own path. Which is not dissimilar to recruiting for early stage companies, right? It's finding that needle in the haystack, doing the research, trying a bunch of things, like throwing some stuff up against the wall and seeing what sticks, and really having a passion for what you're doing, the clients or talent that you're representing, and doing everything that you can to make their dreams come true.
Certainly, there's a lot of overlap. Now, a couple more questions. I know you want to focus more on recruiting, but I'm just personally just very intrigued.
Exciting.
So how do the economics work for talent management? Like, is it, because I know talent can be paid, from my limited knowledge, in a lot of different ways to entertain, right? Maybe it's the residuals, one time, it's a little bit per year, bi-yearly, bi-monthly. So like, is it just a fraction of however the talent pay is structured, or is there like a standardized way for people who, like myself, had just very limited or maybe perhaps just no understanding or knowledge of just how it works behind the scenes?
Yeah, 100%. So most agents take 10% of their clients' earnings. Wow. So it's 10% of whatever it is you negotiate for them. So you're highly incentivized to get them a great deal. And it's 10% of the gross, not the net, which is really important to, note on that front. So when you talk about like negotiating those employment agreements, you're also thinking about ancillary revenue opportunities. Like, is there room for a clothing line? A lot of celebrities are getting into liquor brands, coffee companies, wellness, et cetera, et cetera. So when you think about the talent that you're representing, you're actually thinking about building a brand and building stuff around them, because certainly when they get paid, you get paid. Until they get paid, you don't get paid. So you're highly incentivized to get them the best deal that you can, and find those, other sources of revenue for them as well. Interestingly, in the recruiting space, I know there are a couple of agencies out there that are focused on that kind of model for tech talent in particular. So kind of representing software engineers, operations executives, et cetera, and trying to connect them with opportunities. And so their pitch to early stage, late stage companies is you don't have to pay us a retention fee. We get paid by the folks that we're presenting to you if you hire them.
Absolutely. We call that the OG contingency model, success model. It's typically most applicable to like smaller companies and startups where they're very, very conscious about their budget. They need to stay lean and be aware of their burn. So as you put it perfectly, like it does not require them to pay anything up front, no monthly. It's just, hey, like you pay us when you're happy, right? And so it's a great way to get in the door in terms of developing new businesses with clients. But I think for more budget conscious companies, it's the way to go. So that's really cool. And then I guess I'm one more question. What is the biggest difference? So I guess what was the hardest thing about working with like entertainment personalities versus like the type of talent now you're working in more of the corporate world or in the tech world?
You know, at the end of the day, the parallels are there, right? Whether you're working with an individual or a company, whatever stage you're in, you're helping to build that business. I think the primary difference being when it comes to personalities, they're personalities, right? So you're a part of that personality's life in a very holistic way. You know, I would have candidates call me when they found out they were expecting or they had some other major life event. In many cases, I was the first phone call that a lot of folks made to say, hey, this is happening. How is this going to affect us? Similarly, I would get a lot of frivolous calls about stuff that was completely unrelated to careers, development, etc. So you end up being certainly a career champion, but you're also a friend, a confidant, a therapist, etc. Whereas when you're an in-house recruiter or even, you know, an agency recruiter, certainly the I would say the therapist and confidant piece comes into play when you're helping candidates decide, negotiate, you know, go on board with a new company. But it's less of that like phone calls on Friday night at 9 p.m. saying, hey, I got invited to this thing, should I go? Versus like, hey, I have this other process with an exploding offer. How quickly can you guys move? So I would say that is the difference. But I think certainly my time in entertainment was thrilling, super rewarding. It really taught me to move with a sense of urgency, regardless of what the task at hand is. You know, I've been very early in my career, I've been, you know, reprimanded for bringing talent coffee at the wrong time. And so when you learn that like that's potentially a huge priority or a big deal, everything becomes a big deal. So you learn to move with your hair on fire with a sense of urgency and to move quickly but thoughtfully to ensure that things are getting done. And similarly, recruiting, entertainment, talent management, what have you, it's all about client services, right? You are working to further someone's career, someone's business, etc. And so you need to treat that like you would treat your own business and make sure that you're maintaining that executive presence, keeping people informed, up to date, and moving with that sense of urgency to help move the business forward.
I appreciate the insight. Now let's fast forward to the topic at hand, staffing recruiting. So
yes,
of course, let's jump over to influencer marketing. I could talk a whole day about influencer marketing. That's really, really cool. And then before you switched internal corporate, you kind of dabbled in the agency side. So just want to learn a little more about that. Like, were you focused mainly on the candidate side? Were you running a full desk? I know you said, I think you were in finance. So who were some of your clients? Were they just large hedge funds, investment banks, or boutique kind of investment banks out there? We'd love to get a little more context.
Yeah. So my segue into agency recruiting was, again, totally by accident. A friend of mine knew that, my side hustle as a freelance recruiter was becoming too much to handle. And I really didn't want to fly by the seat of my pants anymore. I wanted to get like formal best in class training. And someone said, hey, I know this company that's hiring for recruiters. They happen to be like a best in class buy side financial services agency. And I was like, well, I don't know much about buy side finances, but let's see how this goes. So I cold emailed the CEO of this incredible firm. The company at the time, and still is, entirely female owned and operated. And I just said, hey, transparently, I don't know anything about buy-side finance, but I think I could do this. Like, would you be open to having a 15-minute conversation with me? And I have to search for the exact email response because I know I have it. But the CEO was so gracious. And I think the response went something like, I'm not entirely sure what I would do with you, but let's chat anyway. And as fate would have it, I went through the recruiting process. And I think the reason that was a fit was because one, this firm is best in class at what they do. They work with all of the top tier private equity firms, regardless of size and stage. They do some VC work as well. A little bit of hedge on the sell side, but primarily like if you think about the top 10 to 20 private equity firms that are out there in the US, they're all clients, and multiple kind of teams and groups that are a part of those firms as well. So their bread and butter is doing that. Now, what I had the good fortune of doing was focusing certainly on the bread and butter, like private equity associates, principals, etc., but also focusing on investor relations, marketing, operating partners, consultants, all the stuff that was a little left of center or not kind of squarely in that finance domain, because I didn't necessarily know how to talk that talk initially. So I'm very lucky that the CEO and the team gave me the chance to get up to speed, learn how to use like a custom ATS, take copious notes because their clients expected a very like top tier white glove level of service, and learn how to truly interview candidates and evaluate them appropriately. So doing that was an incredible experience, one that I wouldn't have otherwise had. And I'm just grateful that the CEO and the team said, I think you might be able to do this too. And my intellectual curiosity allowed me to get up to speed quickly.
What would your advice be to those that are getting into either their first recruiting job or another recruiting job where they would have to be responsible for talking to candidates in a new market they don't have any experience with? Did you do a lot of studying on the side? Like, how did you ramp up and get to know that market really well? Do you have any tips or advice that you'd like to share?
Yeah, that was a big concern actually of the team for bringing me on, simply because they are known as a best-in-class firm. Their clients expect a certain level of knowledge and service. I'm very lucky that I have a number of friends who work in buy-side finance, and I just said, listen, I'm going to tap my network. I'm going to get up to speed. I'm going to read these books. I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that I'm up to speed quickly and that I can get this job done, which is super important to one, state in an interview process, and I would say definitely to follow through on. So I was able to get up to speed really quickly because I had an understanding of some of the various roles that were out there. But I also was able to tap into my network and just call people and say, hey, what is it that you do actually? Exactly. Like, what is this role that you hold at this massive investment bank or this like really big private equity firm? What is it that you do in your day to day? What does this mean? And, if you were searching for a new opportunity, what would have to align for you to make that move? What should I know as a recruiter to make it easier for you as a candidate? So I think it's really important for folks to build a network of people across various industries. So you can tap into that and really just phone a friend, phone a friend, have a casual no or low stakes conversation, so you can get up to speed quickly. But I think it's demonstrating that intellectual curiosity, the desire to be a part of an organization, the desire to learn, and stating very specifically how you are going to, live up to those expectations.
In finance, what is the most common way to reach candidates? Is it through email? Are you cold calling them? And what's the go-to tool? Is it LinkedIn? Is it a variety of hodgepodge platforms that you're using?
Oh, goodness. So the secret sauce is the reason why most finance recruiters come from finance is because those networks are deep. And so the secret sauce, I would say, especially when it comes to more junior level recruiting, is getting the lists from all the investment banks and consulting firms that are out there, of new analysts that are joining their desks. So kids that are just graduating from college, getting those lists of who's coming on board to each group at each investment bank, and then looking them up on LinkedIn, emailing them if you have their email, because most of those lists that those investment banks keep or consulting firms keep have email addresses attached to them. So obtaining those through your networks and then reaching out to every single new person, new grad that's hitting their desk and saying, tell me about yourself, tell me about your long-term career goals, and then tracking those candidates through their entire career. It's wild. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Most firms in that space have a custom ATS because they track those candidates through, the entire life cycle of their career. And what they're doing is when they're running searches, if they haven't talked to a candidate in 6 months or more, regardless of whether they're a right fit for the search or not, they're having those catch-up calls with candidates. So if you're in finance at an investment bank, at a top tier consulting firm, you're likely getting outreach to by recruiters on a very regular basis, not just for opportunities, but for those catch-up conversations to keep those notes fresh about the types of roles that these folks are looking for if they were ever going to make a move.
Oh my goodness, so fascinating. And then I also know that when in the agency external space, compensation, it's literally unlimited different types of variations out there. So at this particular job of yours, was it kind of like a salary plus commission on the back end for you, or was it something else?
Yeah, so it was salary plus what I'll just call like profit sharing. What was great is, at the end of the year, if the firm did well, everyone did well. Now, of course, that was all adjusted based on, level of seniority at the firm, what you were exactly were handling for the firm. But there was a base salary element, and then I guess the strongest way to describe it would be like profit sharing.
And then did a lot of financial firms, particularly this one as well, follow the success-based or contingency model as well in terms of how they got paid, or was it something else as well?
It was retained search. So, yeah. And you do that because of what I just mentioned, right? Like all of these firms are kind of constantly outreaching to the same pool of candidates. Like there are only X number of people in like the oil and gas group at JP Morgan. So if you have 5 recruiting firms working on the same search, it's just about who answers the email first, right? So the point being is most of these firms work on a retained search basis. So it's, the upfront fee plus a percentage of the candidate's starting salary.
Wow. So why did you end up making the switch to corporate internal? Why didn't you continue in the agency external world? Perhaps joining maybe another firm in a different sector, or perhaps continuing your career in the financial buy side track?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, such a great question. So when I was at the buy side agency, I really just loved working with growth equity firms, VCs, early stage investors. I always had kind of my finger on the pulse of new technology, stuff that was going on in like the broader tech atmosphere, and was able to speak to what a lot of these firms' portfolio companies were doing, which was helpful in talking to candidates, right? If I said, hey, this company is invested in these three technologies, if you don't know about this, this is what they're up to, et cetera, et cetera. And so I made the move to go in-house because one, at the time, Cloud Kitchens was very early stage, helmed by a interesting founder. A lot of folks have opinions about that founder one way or the other, but I felt it was kind of that once in a lifetime opportunity to be a part of a hyper growth organization that was scaling globally, kind of everything everywhere all at once. And so being a part of that, having the experience of recruiting in a lot of those first executives in a given region, given country, was one that I likely wouldn't have otherwise. So yes, could I have stayed the course in buy side? 100%. But I love the fast pace, hair on fire. Let's do everything that we can to accomplish this task yesterday sort of pace.
A lot of people say that overall, just general broad strokes, the agency world is a lot more chaotic and fast paced, right? Were you ever concerned that the internal corporate side would be too slow, or was it also at the perfect timing because it was a rocket ship and things are moving at a million miles an hour that kind of felt like it was fast enough for you at that time?
Oh, it was definitely fast enough. Kind of the famous saying that I've adopted from my time at Cloud Kitchens is you're making lemonade out of thin air. At most agencies, there's a lot of process already established, right? You know that this is the format that you're sending an email to an executive with. This is the type of information you're providing. This is your bank of candidates. This is, how you go about doing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. At an early stage hypergrowth company, regardless of sector, there's nothing there. There's no process. There's not necessarily a whole bunch of folks that have done this thing you're trying to do before. So you're building all of that from scratch and trying to track the data in real time to see if what you're doing is actually working. So it's, yes, the agency world moves very fast. It's a very different kind of fast from building the rocket ship as it's taking off.
But it sounds like you don't really miss the agency world too much, right, Sam?
Listen, I am a process junkie, and I am so grateful for the agency experience that I have because it taught me the importance of process. It taught me the importance of asking the right questions, of like taking those detailed notes, of actually following and implementing a process, both as a recruiter and for your stakeholders, right? Because when it comes to being in-house, a lot of companies are just like, well, let's do this day. Let's try something else tomorrow. And it's important to have process, implement process, so that you can gather the data around the process that you're running and see where things are falling short. See where you can up level that process and present that data to stakeholders so that they know while they're growing the business that you're making the best informed decisions for the recruiting function at any given time.
So if somebody wanted to eventually work internal or be a corporate recruiter later in their career, do you also advise, based on your own experience, that, hey, dabbling in the agency world first, perhaps to get that process training could be super helpful that you can leverage online?
Yeah, 100%. I think learning how to talk to candidates and learning how to balance those client relationships is super important because when you transfer that in-house, the only difference is that everyone's on the same team when you're in-house. So your stakeholders are still the same. They still expect a certain level of service from you. You're just all working for the same organization. And so it's important to understand how to talk to candidates, how to provide that client service so that when you come in-house, you're you're doing the thing which I think is super important in providing stakeholders with updates, keeping them informed so that stakeholders aren't asking you as a recruiter what's happening with these open roles that you're, hoping to fill.
What sort of positions were you responsible for at Cloud Kitchens and even afterwards at Plaid?
Everything.
Was it technical and non-technical? So a little bit everything underneath the sun?
Yes. So I've done sourcing and interviewing for engineers. I've done product management, product design, support, sales, customer success, all the G&A functions, operational functions. You name it, it seems like I've done it, which has been awesome. And that, I think, is the most exciting thing about working in-house, in particular at an earlier stage organization. It's not for everyone, but I was lucky enough to have the experience, first coming into Cloud Kitchens, working on, executive hiring, building out that kind of first slate of executives for the core business, then scaling up recruiting globally for a spin-off business. And that meant establishing processes for every single function for this business in real time, interview plans, job descriptions, compensation bands, like you name it, building it from scratch and hiring across every single function at every level of the business at that time. So that meant hiring folks that were entry-level customer support agents all the way up to, a head of SMB sales, SMB meaning small and medium businesses, to a head of global legal compliance, and everything in between. So strategic finance, business operations, digital asset managers, like everything under the sun. Which has been really exciting. At my time at Plaid, I was a little more focused on our business and corporate development teams, the various people functions, establishing the ventures arm, which was really cool and kind of was a full circle moment from my agency experience to my, corporate experience, and really rewarding in that regard. And then doing some recruiting operations work as well. So I like to say I've been there, done that for most things. I would say my sweet spot is more on the operational side of the house than the business side of the house. But I love talking to product managers. I think it's something that can be highly specialized and really challenging to find that, correct piece of the puzzle. And working with, technical candidates as well is certainly a passion.
So do you see yourself continuing working as a kind of talent acquisition recruiting professional within in tech in the foreseeable future? Or possibly go back to finance or try a whole other industry entirely?
I hope so. I consider myself a generalist in that I've become industry agnostic, right? I've recruited across retail, e-commerce, finance, investing, mobility, food and beverage, financial technology, biotech, frankly, but like the list goes on and on, media, entertainment, what have you. So what I enjoy is helping hyper growth companies find those right pieces of their puzzle, regardless of what that vertical is and what exactly that means to them. I think it's super fun presenting those opportunities to candidates too, because they have a chance to have a real impact, not only on the business that they're joining, but an impact on their careers. So hopefully I have a chance to continue to do it in the broader technology space, whatever technology means today. I think the term startup can apply to any vertical, any business, depending on the stage that that company is at. So I enjoy working with those hyper growth companies that are looking to make that next right hire, the next right choice for their business.
So when you made that jump from the finance buy side into tech, did you just follow your same advice that you shared earlier in terms of how do I get to know tech and all these different professions as fast as I can? Is it just leveraging your network again, studying, being a sponge, taking copious notes, all of the above? Or was it something different in tech that you were able to do that you weren't able to do before in finance?
I really did follow the same playbook. I'm very lucky that my spouse is a serial startup person. So their network is incredible. And I got to, tap into that network, learn a lot about the folks that they know, what they do, learn about, my spouse's experience in the space. But also I just kind of dove head first into immersing myself in that community, whether that's listening to podcasts like Equity or Pivot, really getting up to speed on the various blogs that are out there, subscribing to newsletters, researching VCs. I subscribe to a number of VC newsletters, which I find really interesting because they talk a lot about not only their portfolio companies, but companies that are doing interesting stuff in various verticals. Because when it comes to being in the technology space in a broader sense, there's always something new, someone doing something really cool. And so the second that you kind of step away from that, you've missed a potential opportunity for sourcing new candidates or learning about a potential competitor to the company that you're, supporting right now. So it's really about being a sponge. If you have the desire and interest, just go for it. Learn everything you can, develop a perspective, and be open to just having those conversations with people about what it is that they do on a day-to-day basis and learning the ins and outs of that business.
It's really great advice, Sam. I appreciate you sharing that. What were some of your go-to favorite tools or apps you like to use at Plaid or Cloud Kitchen? Do you even have for the internal folks in the community who are listening,
Ooh.
do you have a favorite ATS? So I know that could be a
That's
really
not
big,
fair.
I know that could be a really big pain point. So I just wanted to ask for your perspective.
The favorite ATS that I've used, so this is interesting. Favorite ATS I've used is Greenhouse. ATS I'm most excited about is Ashby. I have considered setting up a demo with their team for myself personally, because I think what they're trying to do, and hopefully they're executing on it, is really important because it's tying together a lot of different software tools that a lot of us in-house recruiters rely on. Other software tools that I rely on, Gem, because a lot of ATSs don't allow you to pull some of that data easily around candidate outreach, response rates, different demographic data, et cetera, which I think is hugely important to any recruiting process. I think my newest favorite tool is probably Gong, to record candidate conversations, simply so I can be more focused on the conversation with the candidate as opposed to taking notes while trying to actively listen and form a hypothesis about a candidate. If I can listen more actively and have an AI take those notes for me, I think that's super helpful. And then an emerging product that I'm pretty excited about is called candidate.fyi, really focused on candidate experience. I think in this time that we're in, with a lot of folks coming available and actively searching, candidate experience really matters. It really does. Even though maybe there's been a shift in power from candidates to employers recently, candidate experience is everything. If a candidate has a positive experience with you as a recruiter and as a company, they're much more likely to accept that offer if they have competing offers, etc. So I would say things to index on: candidate.fyi, Gong, Greenhouse / Ashby.
I'm familiar with most of them, but a couple new ones. And then are you, in terms of the remote landscape, are you mainly pro remote? Do you like going into the office, hybrid? Where do you lie on that?
As recruiters, we're on the phone or on Zoom calls most of the day. I like seeing folks in an office, but I'm comfortable in like a hybrid environment. I think it's important to build those trust-based relationships with folks. Some people are more easily able to do that in person versus remotely. But I've had the experience of working across every conceivable time zone, it seems, with team members. So I do my best to build those trust-based relationships through regular interactions, not just in the office.
Mm. And then last but not least, just a broad question. Where or what do you see in terms of the future of recruiting and how it's panning out, or how you think it's going to pan out?
That's a great question. I've noticed that there are a lot of AI tools coming into recruiting, kind of like Gong that I mentioned, which is a helpful tool. I think what's important to note about recruiting is that there's always going to be a human element. And AI can't take a look at someone's resume and say, oh, I know that's a hyper growth company. This person probably has transferable skills that could work for this company I'm recruiting for right now. Maybe over time that will evolve. But I think there's always going to be a strong human element to recruiting. One, because in recruiting, you have to be building those relationships with candidates as you take them through the journey. So as much as I'm excited about the advancements in technology to help with scheduling, interview loops. Modern Loop is probably one software tool I should probably mention as well. But when it comes to, scheduling, interview loops, automating certain processes, automating emails to candidates to just help things move faster, there's always going to be that human element. So I think when it comes to the future of recruiting, it's about making processes more efficient while having that human interaction to make sure that candidates feel comfortable taking the leap and coming on board to a company where they feel not only like they're a fit for the role, but a fit for the company culture, and that the company is a fit for them.
It's easier said than done. It really is.
Yes.
But I'm also very interested in just doing my best to keep on the pulse of just these new kind of softwares, particularly the AI sector. And there's, as you put it well, like there's a lot of them coming out all the time.
Yes.
But I will certainly take notes and try the ones I haven't heard of, and for the first time, obviously from you, from this conversation. So we'll certainly check them out and let you know my thoughts. But it's really an exciting time to be a recruiter, especially like now with the advent, or even just like the fast acceleration of new tools that we can use to just amplify our value to stakeholders. It makes being a recruiter and working with all the people that we interact with every single day a lot more exciting and productive. So I really definitely appreciate your time, and I'm really, really impressed with everything you've done and how you're able to really adapt and pivot to such different sectors and markets and industries, from talent to influencer to recruiting. And it seemed like wherever you drop yourself, Sam, you just absolutely pick yourself up and you crush it, which is really, really cool. So,
oh my gosh, you flatter me.
So for the people who are listening, and hope that one day they would love to follow in your footsteps, whether it's to have an amazing career, or whether it's pursuing a career in talent management, or recruiting or influence marketing, and working your way up, and then just being able to be open-minded and taking on all these challenges and coming out with tremendous success, like what would be your one big piece of advice you'd like to share?
Take the risk. Send the email. Don't be afraid of not having a connection somewhere, and make sure you're able to communicate your transferable skills. I've just been so lucky that there have been so many folks throughout my career who've said, I think you can do this, who've taken that chance on me, who've taken a risk and bring me into their organizations for short and long periods of time. And it's just because I took that first step in saying, hey, I'm interested here, and demonstrating that I had the passion and desire to learn everything I could to deliver that impact to the organization. So take the risk, reach out. I know it's easier said than done, but take the risk on yourself, invest in yourself. And I hope that you're able to find those champions for your career as I've been able to find mine.
Take the risk and take the action. If people also wanted to find you and reach out to you and ask you for advice, where can they find you?
Oh, I am hugely communicative on LinkedIn. You can find me at Samantha Sandor on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. I'm not like super active on social media, but because I spend most of my day on LinkedIn anyway, that's definitely going to be the place to find me.
Well, you heard it from Sam. If you want to reach out to her, please feel free to reach out and she'll be happy to answer and field any questions that you have. But Sam, want to thank you one more time for your time. Thank you for sharing your story and for being raw and honest and open and transparent about your experience, and excited to see what the rest of this crazy 2023 year has in store for you. We'll certainly keep in touch and wish you nothing but success.
Oh, likewise, Preston. Thank you. Keep crushing it.
I'll do my best, Sam. Thank you so much.
You got it.